Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the regularly scheduled meetings of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm Abdi Sami, the chair of the committee, and I have with me Council Member Johnson, Fletcher, Palmisano, and Vice President Jenkins. And we have a quorum of the committee, and we can dispense with our business today. On our consent item, we have 39 items for consideration. And we actually have 40 items of consent, and I'm going to read all 40 of them. Item number 1 is a legal settlement between Ketrosa versus City of Minneapolis. Item number 2 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim by Robert Highhurst. Item number 3 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim by Trevor Dewey. Item number 4 is a grant award from the Minnesota Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the Police Bomb Disposal Unit. Item number 5 is a one-time transfer of cash balance from parking fund to general fund. Item number 6 is a 2018 Tenant Remedy Act assessment. Item number 7 is a contract amendment with Maya Schreier and Rock Castle Limited for architect and engineering of record design services for the new public service building project. Item number 8 is a bids for concrete, steel installation and waterproofing for the new public service building project. Item number 9 is a contract amendment with Backbone Enterprises, Inc. for cybersecurity review. Item number 10 is an appointed position in the Public Works Department, Deputy Director of Public Works Business Administration. Item number 11 is a collective bargaining agreement, Construction Equipment Operators Unit 2018 through 2020. Item number 12 is a grant application to the United States Department of Health and Human Services for the Healthy Start program. Item number 13 is a 2018 One Minneapolis Fund funding recommendations. Item number 14 is a Minneapolis Pathway 2018 grant agreements. Item number 15 is a contract amendment with Hennepin County for cost sharing of Minnesota Family Investments Program in employment and training services. Item number 16 is a contract amendment with Employ Milwaukee, Inc. for information technology, employment, and training services. Item number 17 is a contract with Tree Trust for tree planting services. Item number 18 is a donation of travel and lodging expenses for Bloomberg American Health Summit. Item number 19 is a modification to 10 tax increment financing plans to increase the TIF budget for affordable housing. Item number 20 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development Redevelopment Grant Program for August 1st, 2018 grant round. Item number 21 is a 2018 Affordable Housing Trust Fund Award and 2018 Pipeline AHTF Award. Item number 22 is a contract with B2G Now, Ask Reply Inc., or B2G, to provide and implement a compliance management system. Item number 23 is a contract with Everlaw Inc. to provide an e-discovery and redaction system. Item number 24 is a contract with Premier Global Services Inc. to provide teleconferencing services. Item number 25 is a contract with multiple service now vendors to establish an information technology services now consulting pool. Item number 26 is a contract with various vendors to establish an information technology staff augmentation consulting pool. Item number 27 is a contract with Project Consulting Group to provide business impact analysis consulting services. Item number 28 is a 2018 levy for special assessments relating to nuisance conditions and unpaid administrative enforcement fees and fines. And item number 29 is a Hennepin County Environmental Response Fund grant application for 410 West Lake Street. Item number 30 is a bid for 34th Avenue South Street reconstruction project. Item number 31 is a bid for 4th Street Southeast Electric Enhancement Project. Item number 32 is a contract amendment with M10 for cleaning and lining of cast iron water remains. Item number 33 is a bid for sidewalk and parking lot snow clearing removal and ice control services for Special Services District. Item number 34 is a contract amendment with Ty-Zack Concrete, Inc. for Lindale Safe Route to School project. Item number 35 is the 2018 to 2023 Customized Safety Training and Training Services Vendor Pool. Item number 36 is a bid for rental of work zone traffic control devices. Item number 37 is a grant application to the Minnesota Department of Health for evidence-based home visiting program. Item number 38 is a contract with Central D, I can't pronounce that name, Sutel for collaborative enforcement of labor standards. Item number 39 is a competitive bidding thresholds ordinance. Item number 40 is a 2018 third quarter financial status report, which is a receiving and filing the 2018 third quarter financial status report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion. Is there any discussions, any of the items from my colleagues? Okay, seeing none, so I'm going to make a motion to move all these items for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Those items have been approved. And then we have item number 40, which is again the 2018 third quarter financial status report. And any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I move to receive and file this item. All those in approval say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. That item has been approved. And then we have item number 41, which is our one discussion item today. Item number 41 is an investment policy relating to city investments in mortgage-backed securities. And this item, we do have a number of presenters. And we have Mr. Mark Ruff here, so go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mark Ruff. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. If you Council is aware, the city hires a variety of firms to help manage our investments. Some of those investments are shorter term and some are longer term. Mike Ablin is here with Ray Warimi. Mike and Ray oversee our investment portfolio with these managers. We have one of the three long-term managers we have currently under contract is RBC, and periodically we encourage our vendors to bring ideas to us, and there's an idea that they are utilizing for other clients that they thought we may be interested in. This is not an action item for the council right now. What it is just information, and we'll take your feedback and potentially change our investment policy. But I think on a more global level, and just reminding the council that we did change a few years ago the investment policy to allow for longer term investments. Typically we keep our investment short, under 5 years, but we do allow for longer term investments up to 10 years for NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing buildings, where nonprofit or for-profit developer buys the building. They are able to secure a mortgage with Freddie Mac. In the case of what we were working with, RBC was actually very helpful in those discussions where Freddie Mac would actually then insure just one mortgage in the city of Minneapolis, and we would buy that security, because that is, once the Freddie Mac essentially insurance is on that, we are then eligible under state statute to purchase that. To date, just given the cost of housing and how quickly these properties turn over, we have not been successful in securing one of those mortgages. And so as a complement to that same strategy, and just as a context, I'd ask that you listen to the work that they're doing with similar institutions on a targeted investment policy. It's not a replacement for the NOAA investments. It's just more of a complement, as I said, of what the same philosophy. And as I said at the end, we appreciate any questions and feedback. With that, I'm going to turn it over. We have two speakers from RBC today. Bethany Jensen is going to lead off, and then from the RBC New York office with a specialty in this is Catherine Benet. So I'll turn it over to Bethany.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Again, my colleagues and I here are very thankful for the opportunity to be here today and speak to you on this opportunity. As Mark said, we are here from RBC Global Asset Management. We are one of the investment managers for the city of Minneapolis. And we are especially excited to be here, just given our relationship with the city, the fact that our firm's headquarters are right down the street here in Minneapolis, and just really excited about the opportunity here today, how it impacts our city. So I'm Bethany Jessen. I'm an institutional portfolio manager. Joined with me is Catherine Bennett. She's also an institutional portfolio manager and subject matter expert on impact investing initiatives. And Brian Svendal is our lead portfolio manager and co-head of U.S. fixed income strategies. And he's also the lead portfolio manager on the City of Minneapolis's current portfolio. Maybe just flipping to our prepared materials here on the second page, we wanted to provide a little bit more background on RBC and our relationship with the City of Minneapolis. As noted, RBC is one of the investment managers of the city's current portfolio. We manage roughly $200 million in assets on behalf of the city. This is all short-term fixed income securities, investing in U.S. treasuries, U.S. agencies, and agency mortgage-backed securities, all beholden to the Minnesota state statutes. And what this means is it's a pretty low-risk, safe portfolio. The portfolio's allowable investments must fall under these Minnesota state statutes, which we have outlined in this graph below. And you'll notice this is lifted out of the state statutes and describes the permissible assets. So you'll notice United States securities, all guaranteed by the government, consist of government bonds, notes, bills, as well as agency mortgages or agency MBS, which is a pool of mortgage-backed securities issued by government-sponsored entities that is used to finance multifamily affordable housing, among other things. Examples of that are Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Ginnie Mae's. So while we are beholden to these state statutes, we also manage the portfolio according to the city's investment policy guidelines, which is on the right-hand side of the page here, which stipulates that assets should only be invested in securities authorized by the state statutes, as well as the securities must have a weighted average maturity of under 5 years. So this is how we are currently managing the portfolio. Kind of moving on to our next page here, we wanted to introduce some of the work we've been doing with local investing and conversations we've had with the city's finance committee around our impact investing initiatives. So yes, at RBC we have capabilities to invest in local communities, and these are investments that can directly promote affordable housing in the city of Minneapolis. And we want to be clear that this is in the form of an agency mortgage-backed security, which we described on the previous page, and is eligible under Minnesota state statutes. So in doing so, RBC, we have collaborated with the Minnesota Impact Investing Initiative, which we refer to as the MI3, and Catherine will describe in greater detail in a minute here. But really want to emphasize that through our relationship with the city's finance committee, we've had multiple conversations on the topic of local investing and just ways to promote affordable housing in Minneapolis. So we believe that a solution begins with directly investing in the Minneapolis-specific projects. And these are through, again, those agency mortgage-backed securities allowed by state statutes. We believe that these investments will meet both financial goals as well as support affordable housing in the city of Minneapolis. So with that, we're here to tell you more about this solution, and I will kick it off to Catherine to tell you more about the Minnesota Impact Investing Initiative, MI3. Oh, it's gone.
I just clicked on the wrong thing.
That's still the wrong one.
He's very good at managing fixed income, not so good at technology, but I assure you it's not indicative of his talent.
Is it?
It's PowerPoint.
Oh,
Wait, nope.
no.
The next one. Sorry,
Is it not there?
It's just.
Okay.
That's
Does
weird.
Mark any better? Let's see.
See how it's.
We have the same problem with some of
There we go.
No, it's. The next page is what's going. Should we use the zip drive?
Oh, I have this.
We also have hard
Right.
copy backup in case.
Just use the packet, that's fine.
Yeah, everyone has a copy. I can work on the,
Do you have-
on the power.
If you want to just
Do you
give me
have,
60
I'm
seconds
turning,
here, I'll-
sure.
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's the
You can also use just
Do you have the hard copy?
We all have.
Here, I'll hand them out.
Okay. Thank you.
so that will have
Oh, there we go.
Do you want to,
That's a different presentation.
It is.
But the one we just handed out is the one that you want? Okay, correct, just use that.
we can use this.
Great. Terrific. Thank goodness you have a fallback system.
There we go.
So I'm going to just describe briefly the Minnesota Impact Investing Initiative, which we referred to as, Bethany says, as MI3. It's a collaboration among a group of Minnesota-based foundations to invest in Minnesota. It was led by the Minnesota Council on Foundations that brought together its members to figure out how to direct dollars to the state that everyone cared about. It consists of 11 foundations. You know many of them: McKnight, Bush, Otto Bremer, the St. Paul Foundation, the Minneapolis Foundation, to name a few. And it consists of about $23 million at this point. The goal was to catalyze dollars to invest in the state of Minnesota on behalf of these foundations and to be a catalytic capital source, not to be the be-all and the end-all, but to bring along lots of other institutions. And you were in our thoughts and minds at the time, as well as a lot of the high net worth investors here in town. The investments are focused on affordable housing and on small businesses throughout Minnesota, and the goal is to mobilize dollars. So this is really why we're honored to present to you today, because of the ability to grow this initiative. The investments on page 5, the investments that are currently in the MI3 portfolio are graphically depicted in the what I call the heat map. And they're concentrated around Minneapolis, as you can see. And there's a breakdown of the types of investments we're making with those dollars, and the size of the bubble relates to the size of the dollars. In terms of affordable multifamily housing, we all know the benefits, I believe, of providing affordable housing to a community. Mark spoke about that earlier. And the great thing about it is it's really adjusted and right-sized to the income of the family and provides shelter, which is a basic need. To give an example,
Council Vice President Jenkins has a question, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Chair Warsami. I'm just curious what the MBS identifier stands for.
thanks for asking. That's mortgage-backed securities. It can include both single-family mortgages and multifamily mortgages. And here today, we're here to talk about focusing on the multifamily affordable housing opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for not being clear.
No, go ahead.
So we have an example of an investment we've made on behalf of MI3, which is the Midtown Exchange. I believe you're all familiar with it. It's 1 million square feet for mixed-use facility. It's redeveloped after 10 years of vacancy, and a lot of energy and excitement in the community around it. The goals were to focus on job creation, public safety, and respect for the diversity and history of the neighborhood. The ground floor is business, and there are lots of small businesses there that have been encouraged to provide services and jobs in the neighborhood. And it incorporates office space and, most importantly for this conversation, multifamily housing. 81% of the units are reserved for low-income tenants. The security details are worth considering in the context of some of the things we've mentioned earlier. It is a Ginnie Mae security and a government-backed security. It is a mortgage-backed security. It is rated AAA, and it yields about 4%. And the weighted average maturity is 6.6 years. It is eligible under state statute, but that weighted average maturity is different than the current portfolio. So it is a debt obligation. It is under it is eligible under state statute, and it creates an opportunity to align your investment dollars with everyone's desire to support affordable housing in Minneapolis. Are there any questions so far?
Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Warsami. So I was a housing organizer during the period of 2008 to 2012. And so I hear mortgage-backed securities, and I'm trying not to freak out, but they really kind of crashed our economy. And so I'm struggling to understand how they're safe now, how we should trust a AAA rating on a mortgage-backed security now. What's different?
I'm so glad you're bringing that up. It's a question we often get. And to be clear, these are mortgages that look like, first of all, they're guaranteed and backed by government agencies and the U.S. government itself, whether it's a Ginnie Mae or a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac. And these are not in securities that are packaged where the credit rating is stacked and where therefore the terminology in 2008 was subprime. These are not subprime mortgages. These are right-sized for the income on the property. And so they are not stretches, but they are well underwritten and packaged accordingly. Do you have any additions to that?
No, I would just reiterate reiterating the government quality of the actual mortgages, and very similar to the program that Mark described with the NOAA projects, just not necessarily NOAA projects, but all in the city.
Did that address your question? Okay. Any other questions?
Go ahead.
Anything to add?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I think one thing that's important to emphasize in this discussion is who really benefits by us purchasing these securities. And I think at first blush, and when I have talked with CPED staff about this, because the question would be, well, is it the developer who benefits? Well, obviously, Midtown Exchange was built a number of years ago. Its mortgage has become a security that is bought and sold, right? And so by pooling this money, I think, for the MI3 initiative, and what we see as a city is we are not benefiting a particular developer. We are not necessarily benefiting a particular development. What we are doing collectively with these institutions is creating more of a market for Minnesota-oriented securities, so that when larger firms but not necessarily RBC, but when larger firms initiate the mortgage process and underwrite them, it can come at a slightly lower interest rate than for future projects. All right. So I want to be clear about the fact that when we buy a security, that especially if it's done, and most of these are done, these buy and sell are 2 or 3 years later after the development is up and running. We are not benefiting a particular development, nor we are endorsing a particular development. We currently have in our portfolio a fair amount of mortgage-backed securities. And I think Brian looked, and at one point in time during the year, we had 0 mortgage-backed securities that were backing Minnesota mortgages. Okay, because what we tell our investment advisors is get us the best rate possible within that 5-year window. I think the benefit of going with this longer term is it opens up a wider universe of potential securities. And part of what I think we had some enthusiasm for staff that was mentioned earlier was not just multifamily mortgages, but also SBA mortgages, small business administration guaranteed mortgages, which I think we have very little, if any, of those in our portfolio, because those typically also go longer than 5 years. So if this has some appeal to you, like I said, it's not a dramatic change in the ability to get new affordable housing projects done, but it is more of a focus for us to bring our money toward Minnesota, which then endorses Minnesota as a great place to invest, which has ripple effects that we think are material. If this is something of interest to you, what we would bring back to the council for future consideration would be a modification to our investment portfolio to say we can invest no more than 5 years for most of our general securities, but for these special affordable housing projects, and one is NOAA, which is very targeted and very much benefiting a particular nonprofit who is working to meet city goals. And then the second would be this targeted investment strategy that would not exceed what we have in our current portfolio is 10% of our assets, so we have limitations on that. And then we can, again, these particular securities that we're talking about with RBC are not below market securities. We can buy and sell them in the future. So if for some reason we get a big NOAA opportunity, we can sell some of these into the marketplace. It won't interfere with our ability to have more specific orientation around Minneapolis projects. I think generally we're not talking about Minneapolis only for this program. We are talking probably more Minnesota based, but that's some of the feedback that we could hear from you in terms of if there's any specific parameters or questions that you have later on, there's specific parameters. But I think by the fact that it's been used by some of the foundations that Catherine mentioned, that gives me some comfort that those are also fixed income securities of foundations who are also very interested in the same goals that we have. So is that helpful? Did I miss anything in that?
I think Councilmember Fletcher has a question.
Thank you, Chair Warsami. I guess I'm not sure that I feel like I know enough to provide the kind of parameters that you're asking for, so I guess I wonder if you can help us sort of think through. I'm very supportive of the idea of focusing our investments that we're making in Minnesota and particularly in Minneapolis. And so I guess I'm not clear how we would phrase guidance from us around what a parameter would look like to say, we'd like you to really focus in Minneapolis if you can, and then Minnesota
Maybe
more broadly after
Catherine
that.
and Brian can describe what the foundations have put into their language, if that's helpful.
I think if you're speaking to the 10%,
Or just generally, how do you define what is a targeted investment, I guess?
yeah, I think to define I would start with the physical location being within the city rather than the state even. So I think it's very much, we would be able to accomplish it within the city, and to focus on affordable housing or small business development, specifically in low and moderate income areas. And I think it's that's about all you need, and then with a little bit of the adjustment to the investment policy to allow it.
Okay. Any other questions? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Yeah, I guess I would just comment on Council Member Fletcher's concerns. As an African American, 2008 and the ensuing market crash pretty much was the largest transfer of wealth from communities of color in the history of this country. And it was because of really considerably complicated mortgage schemes, for lack of a better word, very difficult to explain, very difficult for a lot of people to comprehend, and consequently, family members, community members, my people lost considerable wealth building opportunities. And so my skepticism lies in that reality. I know our federal government has opened up a lot of new opportunities for these kinds of programs to operate, and it engenders a lot of skepticism for me.
Mr. Chair, Council Vice President, I appreciate your comments. Hence why we're coming to you early before we're bringing any action items so we can have this discussion. The finance world, I think, I'm not going to say that never again, because we can never say never again, right? But the finance world has come a fair amount since 2008. And just a reminder that we have never had a default within the city's securities that I'm aware of in the last 10 or 20 years, because as Mr. Svendal mentioned, we operate in a realm of purchasing securities which are very high quality. And so any of the new affordable housing projects that we are funding through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund are typically using a Fannie Mae or more often a Ginnie Mae structure to get their first mortgages. Okay, so we are already participating in financing of these types of developments. What we are talking about is then also helping these developments longer term by creating a market through our investments. And so I did spend a fair amount of time talking to CPED staff to make sure there was nothing in this that alarmed them, because and some of the things they brought up were, well, what if we end up holding a security for a mortgage for something that's close to the end of the term of the mortgage, and what if it's then after the end of the term of the mortgage no longer an affordable housing project? Do we somehow, are we benefiting or enabling that action to happen? And the short answer is no, because we are buying a security. But if you want us to come back to you with some parameters around even more about options of those kind of scenarios, we can cook up lots of kind of, wouldn't even financial risk, but maybe bad publicity risk from the standpoint of the city. If some of these things happen, those are some of the parameters we can come back to you on. But I want to emphasize that as a part of our mixture in our general investment portfolios, MBSs have been an active part of the portfolio. It does benefit, we think, the whole nation in creating affordable housing, and we certainly would want to focus our investments on those that have long-term affordability as opposed to just shorter-term affordability. So at a basic level, it's doing better than we have been doing in the past by creating that marketplace. I think we clearly hear your concerns, and we will try to flesh this out. I wouldn't have brought this to you if it hadn't been vetted through this foundation process, which again have similar concerns and goals that all of you, I think, do as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I mean, I think just to expand on that, I think it would be very helpful to understand the risks and to do a little bit of that analysis, both in terms of sort of optics or public appearance of what the investment is that we're making, and also in terms of the actual risk. But I do want to make sure I understood your answer correctly to see if we can allay some of the concerns, because I know a decade ago the problem was that mortgage-backed securities, when they get bundled, you'd end up with a whole bunch of mortgages that didn't actually have a lot of value because they were defaulting. And so did I understand correctly? So for example, on page 5, you list MI3 investments. There's 86 loans worth $16 million to low-income single-family homes. Do I understand correctly that those mortgages are insured in some way so that we're protected from liability exposure if we were to have the kind of downturn that we had a decade ago and half of these defaulted? Are we insured against exposure to that?
You are. And 100% of those loans are in securities that are guaranteed at the 100% level by Fannie, Freddie, or Ginnie Mae. Mm-hmm. And I was managing portfolios like this during 2007, 8, 9, and they performed very, very well with no losses and in fact, price appreciation because they were the safer place to be. So financing properties that are desirable to the community because they do have low rents, and the mortgages are structured in a very responsible way.
I think that was going to be my next question is, are there standards in order to be in this portfolio, or is there a risk of us investing in some of the extremely predatory balloon mortgages or other kinds of mechanisms that turned out to be traps for particularly families of color?
Yeah, these are multifamily properties, so you don't have that trap. I think it's more along the lines of what Mark was alluding to with the risk that you own a mortgage on a property and it is affordable and it doesn't stay that way.
It looks like there are single-family homes in the portfolio.
In the MI3 there is.
Yeah.
For the city investment portfolio, we were describing just multifamily was our hope, and small businesses.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions, colleagues? Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Rosami. Is there a limit or a maximum on multifamily? I mean, are we talking small multifamily units, 100 apartment, 100 unit buildings, or
Yeah,
it doesn't matter?
It's driven by the size of the portfolio. So if you were going to do 10% of the portfolio and which is 80 million, and you would want not to be overly concentrated in a given security. So ideally, it would be something like $4 or $5 million projects. So quite small would be ideal, unless you wanted to participate in portions of larger projects, but still focusing on 100% affordable. And it does help you engage in the conversation with those foundations and perhaps other developers to get you closer to that actual NOAA deal, where you wouldn't have to be the investor in the whole project, but if you could be a bit of a tipping point with a first mortgage that's more affordable.
Just to make sure, Council Vice President, we understand your question. Are you asking partly like how small a particular apartment building can be in order to have this type of security? Yeah. So,
The smallest.
so these are pooled investments of mortgages. So what's the minimum that a Freddie or a Jenny will typically do in size? Is it 5 units, 20 units, 100 units?
Well, the smallest they'll do in balance is in the neighborhood of 500,000, I believe. But as you know, in the city, it's going to be very hard to find a multifamily project for $500,000.
Yeah, so it could be as small
It can be
as
a
this.
4-unit
so it could
project.
Be 4 or
that-
10 units. So yeah, doesn't have to be the 100 or 200 unit development.
Right.
To follow up, how large can it be then?
It can be quite large. There's individual projects in New York City that are 500 or 800 million for one mortgage.
And I want to underscore Brian's point that you can buy a piece of that, of a large deal, or you can buy a larger piece of a smaller deal, and it would be scaled and managed accordingly to get the diversification and the impact.
And with all the parameters of the investment portfolio in mind at the same time.
Okay. Any other questions? No. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for your presentation and for your time. Really appreciate it. And thanks to Mark for that as well. I move to receive and file this item. Any further discussions? All those in approval say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That item has been approved. And having concluded the business of our agenda, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.